Absolutely great to be with you, and thanks to Rework for making it happen. My title is Does AI Ethics Matter? Well, I'm going to give you two reasons for why it does, but the very biggest reason is, do you want AI to work in your company, and do you want it not to affect your brand value? And so if yes, then I think there are two things that you really need to think about. One is this Gartner study that by 2020, bias will be so endemic in algorithms, either through the data or through the development of the algorithm itself, that 85% of all AI projects will deliver out erroneous outcomes. Obviously, that's really bad for gender inequality, but also it undermines the usefulness of the algorithms that you're creating. And as you can see, the vast majority of professionals in AI are still male, and we have to do something about that. But the second piece is really, well, if you are not creating trusted artificial intelligence, then you are going to have a loss of brand value if something goes wrong. So the risks have to really be weighed with the benefits of artificial intelligence, and that's where ethics comes in. But I get a whole lot of people saying to me, well, ethics impede innovation. It's like regulation impedes innovation. Well, I'd like to sort of point out some of these things and suggest that maybe actually we need trusted AI to actually move the needle forwards. So also, I don't think that you can ignore trusted AI or AI ethics anymore, because we've got over 160 different sets of ethical principles out there, from Beijing to Montreal to everywhere in the world. And I think also we need to be cognizant of the fact that whereas in 2019, PwC predicted that we would have deployment in business of AI at about 20%, their predictions for 2020 said, actually, that's only 4%. And that was before we had COVID. And the response to COVID tracking apps has shown us that there's a lot of lack of trust amongst the general public in this area. So just taking two use cases, the NHS application for tracking that they developed in the UK, they're trialing it on the Isle of Wight, and their take-up has only been 30%, although it's voluntary, and although one would imagine that people want to contribute to it. So what is that? And by the way, you need a 60% take-up to actually have any real data that we can work with. So even in this COVID crisis, where health is really important to us, we're not signing up for these tracking apps. So is it that we're just lazy? Is it that we think that we don't want to be tracked? Is it that we don't understand how much we're tracked already? Or is it part of what we were seeing in 2019 and we talked about in Davos in January 2020, techlash? Likewise, on the other application, that is just tracking symptoms and postcodes. They've only had 3 million people volunteer in the UK to sign up to it, and even fewer as a percentage in the US and Sweden. So again, we're not prepared to trust algorithms, even though our health is at stake. And that was all happening before the IMF said we're likely to lose 3% of our global GDP. So what can we do to make sure that AI reaches its 15 trillion forecast by 2030 as a benefit to the world's economy, whilst also ensuring these ethical parameters? Well, I think it's important that we begin by just telling you a little bit about what we do at the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is part of the World Economic Forum. We have the offices, as you can see, in San Francisco, China, Japan, and India. And we also have affiliate centers. That's where countries have asked us to open a center in all these other places in the world, 2 in South America, 3 in the Middle East, 2 in Africa, and 2 in Europe. And so what are we doing out of all of these centers? Well, there's a real need and a real energy around how do we create public-private partnerships, multi-stakeholder environments to really make sure that we feel the benefits of AI and mitigate the risks. And we do that by co-creating governance with a small g regimes around AI. So to give you a couple of examples of that, first of all, we worked with the UK government to put in place ethical procurement rules for trusted artificial intelligence. So when the UK in the future is looking to purchase artificial intelligence, it'll be looking for those ethical issues as well. That will obviously create an ecosystem in the UK around ethical AI because suspending power on procurement is so great. And that's also being trialed in Bahrain and is currently being piloted in the UAE. So you'll see that network and that scaling globally of everything we do. We also worked with the Singaporean government on how companies could ethically use AI. So I suggest that you have a look at both of those if you're interested. And also our board toolkit. We found that board members didn't understand very much about AI, and so we wanted to make sure that they had a toolkit to help them navigate that and give proper advice to the C-suite. So let's look at a few other places where we have high-risk case uses of AI and lots of ethical issues involved. One is obviously in facial recognition technology, and we're working on a project with France around that. And the other is using AI to in talent acquisition and how human resources. And we have a project where we're working on that as well. So producing guidelines for ethical use of both of these technologies. It's really important because these are technologies that will actually touch citizens. And if we're to get the benefits of AI, we have to be sure that we minimize the risks and we increase the trust of the general public. Another area that we could do really well with AI is in educating our children. But at the moment, we don't know what they're learning. Your child might have a smart toy. Do you know what the curriculum is? Do you know what the storage of data is? Do you know how they're using facial recognition with that toy? There are many, many questions, and basically we're using our children as guinea pigs at the moment because the governance is very limited in this area. Even if you take out the data privacy issues in American law or GDPR. So we want to think about that, but we also I want to look back and say, well, where did all this information around ethics come from? Why are we talking about ethics? Well, you'll be interested to know that it started back in sort of 2014 when Stephen Hawking said AI could be the best thing that we've ever done as humans, or it could be the worst thing. And I actually became the world's first chief AI ethics officer in 2014. A few of us started to think more seriously about AI ethics as we moved through into 2015. And in 2016, we saw the publication of the IEEE's seminal work on ethics and AI. And then in the bottom picture, you'll see me moderating a panel on AI ethics at Asilomar. A number of us, including Elon Musk and Larry Page and the founders of DeepMind and many others, gathered at Asilomar to really create the first of those, what now is 160 plus principles around AI. It's amazing to me still to think that it was only 2015 when I created the hashtag AI ethics on Twitter. So we've had a lot of principles. The IEEE is working obviously on standards, and that's what I want to talk about next, and that is the operationalization of ethics. So these principles come from the 10 most ubiquitous that PwC pulled out from looking at over 90 of those principle documents from around the world. So we've got all these organizations creating principles. We have some organizations also creating an observatory, for example, like the OECD. We have some organizations that are industry-led, and we're seeing some great work from some of the big tech companies. So, for example, Microsoft's Ether committee that reviews AI work, and Paula Goldman's job at Salesforce as Chief Ethics and Humane Use Officer. So what are these principles and why do they matter? Well, fairness, explainability, beneficial artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of feeling that we really need to, if we're going to use AI, we should make sure that we as humans benefit. Data privacy, that takes us back to some of the COVID issues. Reliability, robustness, and security. Obviously, that's fundamental to anything that we do in this space. Transparency, that takes us back to how we use the technology, and perhaps that human resources and AI piece. Safety and human agency. So we're really thinking about augmenting the human experience as opposed to flipping out humans and putting machines, artificially enabled machines, in their place. So if I go back to children and AI, we don't want to stop our teachers teaching. The best way would be really to use AI to teach where there are no teachers, for example, in rural areas, and also to augment the teachers that we have at the moment so that we can have better quality teaching and our teachers are not exhausted the whole time. So moving on, I want to come to a question that I'm dealing with all the time, the AI and the Harry Potter problem, I call it. And that is, that we can use AI for anything at any time. Well, actually, ethical AI needs a lot of testing. We need to have it trusted, and we need to avoid this backlash that we talked about at the beginning of this discussion. Harry Potter took 7 books to learn how to use his wand effectively, and so we should take note of that. And just to finish by quoting Professor Schwab, who founded the World Economic Forum, the way that companies and countries can keep the digital ecosystem in which we operate reliable and trustworthy is of vital importance. And we need to keep our customers fully aware of the functionality of products and the services, including adverse implications or negative externalities. If we don't, then we don't have a bright future with AI. But otherwise, I think we do. I have talked about some of the 12 projects that we are leading at the moment. If you want to join, or if you want to talk to me, please contact me at ai@weforum.org. That's ai@weforum.org. Really easy. Thank you all very much.